Hi, my name is Kyle Burkholder, and I'm the pastor here at Covenant Church. Thank you for being here and for being part of Covenant Conversations. Our desire is that the conversations we have in this space extend into your relationships and ultimately, maybe even impact your everyday life. For our friends in Northwest Ohio, we believe that life happens in community, and we'd love to invite you to join us and join the conversation in person. So just head to bgcovenant.org/visit to learn more. Now, let's get in the conversation.
Well, here we are for episode 2 of our parenting in the modern world. We're trying to walk through the journey of what it means to be a parent, what the role of a parent is, and we're going to pick up today with what we're essentially going to be looking at, kind of that target of parenting, which is the shepherding, stewarding role. So if you missed our last episode, you're going to want to go back and listen to it, but let me summarize briefly. Essentially what we said is that we're all God's kids, and with right identity, we can begin to display our identity as parents accurately as well. And when we fail at that, we end up finding ourselves, instead of as a shepherd and a steward of our children, who are God's kids just like we are, we find ourselves on one of two poles, two ends of a scale. We're either over-indexing towards being a friend and a buddy and kind of prioritizing their happiness and holding them as God, or on the other end, we are trying to be a ruler, a king or a queen, and we're prioritizing kind of the outward looks and the rules and the cleanliness of life, so to speak, and in that, we are taking on the role of God. And so what we're aiming for is that thing right in the middle. We want to be a steward and a shepherd and root in our proper identity. So Nick, would you pick us up from there? Tell me what I missed from episode 1, and then get us started.
Yeah, no, you did a fantastic job summarizing it. But yeah, we wanted to kind of bore down a little bit more just on this, like in the scriptures, the chief image of leadership is shepherd. The elders are the shepherd of the church. Jesus is the shepherd over his flock. Parents are shepherd over children. And we steward, this word stewardship is we steward our children because we understand ultimately that they're not our kids, they're God's kids. And there's going to be a transference there as they become full-fledged adults. And I have a role. I have an important God-given, God-ordained role to play that God wants to use me in the life as he is ultimately shepherding and caring for them. But yeah, I think of John 10. We're pretty familiar with this passage. Jesus speaks about being the shepherd over his own flock. And in that passage, if you read it, he just talks about that the shepherd goes before, meaning that he leads the sheep out into pastures. He says he comes behind them, meaning he's guarding and protecting them from any sort of weakness or blind spot, that the sheep know his voice. There's intimacy and there's relationship there. There's been that relationship has been cultivated over time that they hear, and then that the shepherd directs, that the shepherd actually is very intentional about leading the sheep to because the shepherd knows what they ultimately need, and he's leading them there. As parents, that's what is true of us. We don't want to abdicate our responsibility by being a friend, of being this steward, and at the same time too, we don't want to just rule. We got to realize that the leadership is very relational. I think of a good illustration is if you can picture spatially, where is everyone? So a king or queen, they sit on a throne. They're high above, they're over and above their children, those who are following them. And so when I parent, am I over and above my child? Am I detached? Am I the one that's just sort of dictating everything? I think of a friend or buddy is on the beanbag chair next to you playing video games with you. It's side by side. It's kind of relaxed, it's casual, again, it's fun. And again, neither one of those are inherently wrong. They're just not the fullest picture. But a shepherd is with the flock. I remember, not that I've seen a whole lot of flocks of sheep, and even though Bowling Green has a lot of farmland, there's not a whole lot of sheep around.
Not a lot of sheep.
No. But I remember being in Germany. I was going through a walk through the woods, and I just happened on the certain part of town where this shepherd was leading his sheep. And there's just this beautiful picture as I kind of came over this hill. I looked on the other side of this kind of stone. It was both a hybrid like fence and stone wall. These sheep just kind of went running into this pasture, and the shepherd was right behind, meaning he had just opened the gate. The sheep then darted out in front of him, and they were there hemmed in inside of this kind of safe confine of this fence to play and to eat, to be safe, to be nurtured, and to grow. And the shepherd was there. The shepherd didn't leave. He didn't close the door and then walk off. The shepherd was there in the midst of the pasture with the sheep. And I think as parents, like, that's where we're at. We're not on their level, like side by side as sheep. We are ourselves. We are shepherds. And yet we're not far off. We're not some other, like, we're with them, leading and guiding them into these safe places where they can feed and grow and develop.
That's really good. So it's almost like as you're talking about the ruler on high, they decree that the sheep would do something, and the sheep has to go do it. But there's no security in that because the ruler's not going before them or scouting it out. He just says, go, take the next hill. Or if you have your side by side, well, now you've gotten the security of people with you, but they don't know what's over the next hill. They're just with you. They're just dumb like you are. And what you're saying is we can take both of those as inadequate. And the third one is really, how about all of security, as you even described, the sheep kind of tumbling into this fold, into this area where they get to eat and play. They had fullness of security, knowing that the shepherd had probably gone before them. They could trust his voice. So when he opens the gate to something, that shepherd's trustworthiness is what leads those sheep to that freedom and flourishing.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I would think, as parents, I would think we want our kids to feel like that. And so talk us through, if you can, a little bit of the shepherding through developmental stages, because where we go with this is it's a good idea to have kind of a construct for what our parenting should look like. But the challenge, of course, is that it's really different to shepherd a 2-year-old than it is to shepherd a 15-year-old. If you did it the same way, you'd be in some pretty big trouble.
They both won't like it.
Okay, yeah, neither one would like the same. So I remember you said you were in Germany and you saw this scene. When I lived in Africa, we would take tourists to the lion park, and the lion park had, it was exactly what it sounds like. They had a lot of lions, but they would raise baby lions and then grow them into mature adult lions and then release them back into the wild. But you would see these caretakers and these wildlife experts, they would be holding and bottle feeding baby lions. And as they grew up and they were slightly toddler lions, they would be wrestling with them and playing with them on the ground. And then pretty soon those lions were bigger than the people. And they did not bottle feed, teenage lions or mature lions. Those lions got treated really differently because not only was it kind of negligent to do it the same way for all of them, but it becomes dangerous for both the lion and the caretaker. And so as you were even kind of talking through the sheep, I'm thinking of the lions, which the lion and the lamb, maybe I tried to do something too much. But walk us through what it looks like as our kids grow from those developmental stages, kind of the little ones all the way through their, exiting college. What do those stages look like? And then what does our shepherding look like as we morph and change with them?
Yeah. And again, we can't fully talk about all of these things. We're hopefully just giving you pictures of what it can look like. And then as you think of through your day to day and what stage your kid is at, it hopefully helps you understand how to shepherd and lead them, care for them where they're at. So 0 to 3 is like the caretaking stage. We've been there, it's the late night bottle feedings, it's the diaper changes, it's the hands-on. They can't feed themselves. They literally need you to feed them or else they will not survive. They obviously go every place with them. We are buckling them in their seats. And so we just fully embrace it. Like in that sense, we are very hands-on and we are controlling a lot of their life. They go where we go and they eat when we tell them that they need to eat. They're going to sleep when we tell them what they need to sleep. And that's kind of the way that goes. Kind of a little bit, kind of beyond 3, we start edging into sort of the cot phase, the 4 to 9. you always kind of hear the terrible twos. I always felt like 3 was actually harder than 2, but they begin to have their own will. They begin to have their own choices. Their personality is starting to bloom, and they're wanting to exercise that thing. They're also maybe starting school or activities. There's maybe a little bit of more free play outside, and yet they don't understand what's safe and not safe. They don't understand what might be around the corner, what dangers might be around the corner. They think all human beings, especially human beings with candy, are like their grandparents and like the greatest. And so we have to do a lot more copying at that stage, which again is not the same thing as like being a king or ruler, but it is much more clearly marking out, hey, these are the boundaries for you. This is what's appropriate. This is what is not appropriate. This is what we'll tolerate in our home. This will not be tolerated in our home, because we're helping set expectations for them. One, of what we expect of them, but then 2, as they engage the broader world, what's safe, what's not safe, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. Now, what's a tough transition, I think, from cop is from cop to coach. Coaching is kind of that 10 to 15 age range, right around there, where our kids are gaining more freedom. They're developing relationships. They have their activities. They're probably able to stay home alone for periods of time. They're getting close to being able to drive and like leave their house on their own. We might drop them off at a football game or something, but there's more autonomy there. And yet, I think as a parent, this can be the hardest, because we're so used to being hands-on with parenting them. Being a coach, we don't realize like, okay, the coach isn't just hands-on. It begins to feel like we're just stifling or crushing or trying to control everything. And yet at the same time, too, we don't want to release them out to the wild, wild west to just sort of have access to anything and everything, because especially with phones, it's all accessible. So thinking of a coach is, in baseball terms, is in the dugout. The coach has their eyes on the field, and the player is playing second base or shortstop or center field or wherever they're at, but the player plays. And the coach isn't beside them or next to them. The coach isn't in their ear on every single play, and the player's free to roam and discover, and there's a lot of trial and error in this phase of parenting. Sometimes things get so ugly, we got to pull them and put them on the bench for a little bit and then send them back out. But ultimately, this is where we begin to release them into the world to kind of discover themselves, try and fail as we coach them through different situations in their life.
That makes a ton of sense. So if I can, then your baseball analogy starts to really hit home. So early on, it's kind of T-ball. We need to do it for them. They're incapable. So the caretaker role is more, it's early. I mean, it's even pre-T-ball, but you know what I'm saying. And then dad's pitch is the next thing that happens for little baseballers, because they're not good enough at throwing the ball. So parent is actually on the field playing with them, doing it with them. And then you're saying as the coach, you begin to recede out of the active, and it matches their brain, development too. Their prefrontal cortex comes online, and now they have their critical thinking starts, and their drive and their will really begins to take shape. And at that point, you're saying we're in the dugout and we're cheering them on, coaching them. We're chiseling where they're off. We're sitting them on the bench if something goes really wrong. There's correction in that. But that's where they really begin to take off on their own. Where does that take us? So now we're in the dugout. Some of us are getting scared here. How does it get worse? How does it get more detached than that?
I would say this. It felt like in the cop phase there was a lot of punishments, and now, I'm sure you feel this in the coaching phase, because we're both there. There's lots of conversations, and then kind of beyond that, you kind of get 16 to 20, 21. Like there's this consultant phase where they're going to begin to make their own decisions about, their future career. Are they going to go to college or not go to college? What are they going to do with their weekends and their time? And we just have less input over those things, who they're going to date, who they're not going to date, all that kind of stuff. We can try as we might want to try to like clamp down on certain things, but to some extent, as they get older, we are no longer able to do that. They're either going to do it behind our back without us knowing it, or they're just in straight defiance, just going to choose to do what they want to do.
So you're almost saying we're moving out of from that jump you said from cop to coach is a big jump for us to make, because it's really a switch. And it almost sounds like you're saying we go from being the authority in their life, and here that switch even kind of is is stratified a little further. Now we're going from authority, because the coach still has authority, and consultant, we're almost now operating more on influence. We've moved out of authority and into influence, where they're going to make their choices, and we're just hoping to cultivate enough influence to help guide them and direct them, knowing that, especially at 18 in this realm, they can kind of do what they want, and we don't have much say.
Yeah. And we'll talk more about this, I think, in our last episode about how to cultivate. But if I've done a good job in the other stages, if you have a trusted consultant, then you use that consultant.
Yeah.
And so when problems arise, or when they want advice, or when they want wisdom, they trust us. They know our heart. We've built that relationship and those healthy boundaries in our that place in their life that they feel free to access us. And then obviously, we start to get to 22 and beyond as they become adults. We're a companion. We really do hopefully become friends with them. And again, we're still a parental voice amongst all their other friends. And yet it's going to be much more friendship and choosing relationship with each other than before.
Okay. So that's a lot. And that's 22 years happened pretty quick. And I guess from the people I talk to, it happens about that fast. So we got to be prepared and buckle up for it. How do we know then along that fast ride from 0 to 22, from caretaking and coddling all the way to being a companion? How do we know when we're slipping? Like, where are the indicators that we maybe are sliding back into friend buddy, or sliding back into that king queen ruler? Mm-hmm. How do we know?
So I think that this is something that we just need to be aware that in our own inadequacies, insecurities, our own fears, we can lean one way or the other. Fear of I'm afraid of the authority God has given me to use it. I'm kind of going to slide towards the friend phase. 2, I'm afraid of I'm losing my grip over their life, and so I'm just going to kind of, in this season or in this moment, I'm just going to kind of buckle down, and I'm just going to kind of exert my will, as a king or queen. I would say this, for example, like as a ruler, a king or queen, sometimes we can tell that we are being a king or queen when we are narcissistically lording over them. So we want them to do X. We want them to join this sport, or, join dance or ballet. We want them on this sleep cycle because it makes us feel good. It makes us feel like we're doing the right things. We want them to wear X because when they look good on the outside, that means that I'm doing a good job as a parent on the inside. It's lordship because it's my will. It's narcissistic because it's ultimately not really about my child. It's really about me. And this is where I just have to be really honest with myself in the mirror. Them wearing the latest and greatest fashion is really not about them and how they feel. It's about how I look.
It's the reflection of the parent playing king or queen. They want their subjects to look just right because that makes the king or queen look good.
Look good.
Got it.
So we can overlord, I think, in that cop phase, again, where we're supposed to punish, we're supposed to rear and discipline. And sometimes we can tell we've gone too far. The punishment is really more about we're annoyed, or we're disappointed in, or again, their behavior reflects poorly on us. And so we're just going to kind of clamp down extra hard. This is maybe where my punishment doesn't fit the crime. Again, I over punish or inappropriately punish, sometimes I think in that, coaching phase, we can kind of be a divine protector. I'm going to make sure that no bad influence. Now, again, we should be aware if our kids have phones or whatever, like what's going on and what their relationships are like. But I begin to kind of dictate overly. I'm finding myself on the field with them saying you can't do that or can do that. And it's just really not necessarily my place. I'm going to be God. And sometimes I think as they get older, we become administrative assistants. When they're kind of in that 16 to 21, well, they haven't adulted, and so I just kind of take care of their life. Actually, we know a couple who they ended up hiring other high schoolers to do their homework for them. So they didn't want their kids to fail school, didn't want to make their kids do their own homework, so they hired other kids and paid them to do their homework. Like, that's administrative assistant. I'm now going to make sure that my kid doesn't drop a single ball, doesn't miss a single lesson, and I'm going to make sure I run their life.
All of these sound like they're kind of maybe out of the root of control. So whether we're controlling our reputation or over-controlling their behavior, so instead of correcting, we're controlling, Or then as you move into those second two stages where you're talking about, I want to control their safety, or even at the end, just kind of control their launch into adulthood by making sure everything is the way I need it to be for them, and not letting them fail or fall forward. Those all feel like a control thing. What does it look like on the other side if we over-index towards friend and buddy? How do we know we're slipping into that realm?
Yeah, this is where I think we can kind of become attuned. And I think as parents, we probably lean one way or the other in general. We can go both ways, but we probably lean one way or the other. Where, again, we're going to want to feed into their emotional well-being, meaning if they're happy, if they're contented, then I'm doing like a good job. And so again, in those young phases, 0 to 3, as long as, if they never cry, then like I'm doing a good job. If they're always happy, if they're always, have a sucker in their mouth and always getting their way and never throwing a fit or a tantrum, then I'm doing a good job. And all I end up doing is just kind of feeding whatever pleases them in the moment. I think as they get older, we kind of see it as, hey, I'm going to be the fun police. I'm just going to make sure that you have access to everything, and your birthday parties are always the best, and you always have fun, and you're always enjoying relationships. I think 10 to 16, we can get into some potentially like vicarious living.
Yeah.
So I'm going to live through my child. So their relationships, or again, their sports and activities, their successes become my successes. And again, as parents, we want camaraderie in that. There's enjoyment, but we can tell when it begins to be about like, well, when they succeed and they have fun and they do these things, and I kind of get to then sort of feed off of that as well. And I think 16 older, party pal, literally, parents who throw parties for their kids and like, hey, I'll host and provide all the drinks and all that kind of stuff. And we know what kind of drinks we're talking about, right? And again, I'm going to like have fun with you. I'm going to be that much of a companion, as opposed to there being a healthy separation of like, I understand my mom and dad and their role in my life.
Wow. No, those all ring true. And you're right. You can think of going back through your own childhood, or even the children around you current day. You can see both of these kind of slippages happening on either side, and you can think of those examples. And we ourselves fall into these traps at times. So then if these are the things that we are at risk of falling into, of sliding and slipping out of our core identity, how do we stay centered on that shepherding, stewarding role? Where is the rooting there for us?
I think we can ask ourselves this question, as we are parenting, like, who am I and to whom do I belong? When I am indexing towards being a buddy, I have to remind myself that I am like God's child, and since I belong to him, he has placed me as a shepherd over my child's life. I don't want to abdicate that place in their life. I don't want to abdicate that God-given, God-ordained call on my life as a parent. I think as a ruler, to whom do I belong? I belong to the King of Kings, like the Lord of Lords. I belong to the Good Shepherd, the loving Father, meaning that when I begin to have fear over my own well-being or my children's well-being, ultimately I can entrust God to take care of all of the gaps that like I'm gonna miss. And so there's a peace, and I think where there's a lack of peace, maybe we need to just kind of pause and say, why is there a lack of peace? Am I indexing one way or the other? Again, based on the season of life, based on whatever parental move I'm making, that can be really helpful. I think also it can be helpful to remind myself of, to whom does my kid belong? And so, and I know we're going to get into this, but, as we look at my kids' time, as I look at disciplining my children, am I disciplining them in such a way that I'm mindful that they belong to God, ultimately not to me? So if I parent out of annoyance, well, that doesn't matter. Like, it's not about my annoyance. It's about the Heavenly Father's relationship with their child. And so when I remind myself to whom they belong, I can release them, ultimately knowing that they belong to the Heavenly Father.
Well, I don't know how to say it any differently. I was going to ask you for a summary statement, but it seems like you have given it to us. So tell us then, instead of summarizing backwards, because that we can't improve on that, what are we looking forward to in the next episode? Kind of where are we going from here? What is the next frontier?
Yeah, so the next frontier that we want to talk about is probably where in this modern age that we find parenting the most struggle, and that has to do with our schedules.
Okay.
And how do we parent through time and all the time demands that we have?
Whew. Okay. Well, that one, if that one isn't urgent, I don't know what is. So make time in your schedule, and we will be back to do this all again. And again, for Nick Gillispie, I'm Kyle Burkholder, and we're so grateful that you would join us. And we'll be back with episode 3 before you know it.